Hi guys, welcome back to Delaware Studios. We'll be creating an Android Places application which tracks location using the Location API. It's going to have a button that starts tracking the device location. It updates the location every 10 seconds, and you have a reverse geocodes which actually log down to the location coordinates, and it's actually transformed that into a physical address. It's going to start an animation to provide the user with visual feedback that tracking is going on. For you to actually start up this application with me, you should be familiar with some few things in Android. You should have been creating and building and running apps in Android Studio. You should know how to set up the activity life cycle. You should have a persistent data across configuration changes. You should be familiar with async tags to do background work and also requesting permissions at runtime. I'll be heading straight to Android Studio where I have the source code of this application, and I'll be brushing you through on how it's actually been implemented. Starting from the build Gradle, which is the module app where you have your dependencies and where you set up the minimal SDK and so on. You need to add two dependencies once you've created your project. The first is Google Play Services location, and also the Google Play Services places. These two libraries are very, very important. So you sync your Gradle and get set and rolling. From here, we'll look at the layout. Very, very important in any Android application. You must have an eczema to actually depict what your UI is going to look like. We're actually using a coordinator layout to make the wrapper, the constraint layout rather, to make the wrapper around the elements that we'll be looking at. We'll be having the image view, which is actually going to undo the rotation, or let's say the animation, once the tracking starts up. The first button here is the button for the location, and which is actually going to set up your location, while the second button here is for the play speaker. It's actually going to call the play speaker fragment, or there's the dialog, and it's going to pick the right place do you really want to select. And we have a text view to actually display your location. This time your location would have been the coordinates gotten would have been transformed into a real life address. So that's just what that is, and a guideline to just have as a constraint guide percent, which is horizontal around the elements. So this is how your layout is actually going to look like, and you could actually use a relative linear as you feel like. You could style it in a different form. We have for the landscape, once you rotate your application, the landscape view, and you have that set up. So you have that going on right there, and the portrait. Cool. And I will be heading straight to the Java classes, where we have the main activity and the fetch address. Before I head there, I would like to look at the rotate animation that is actually going to take effect on the image view you saw, which is the Android mascot. You have the object animator, whereby the property name is the rotation, and the duration to actually rotate value from, which is -10 to up to the 10, and the repeat count infinite, so it keeps moving, and the repeat mode is a reverse angle. So you have the rotate XML right there in the animator res directory. So right there in the classes, we have the fetch address tags, which is actually going to help in the doing background. That's the async tag to actually fetch the address based on the coordinates returned, and the main activity will trigger all the implementation we had. The main activity extends the app compact activity, and it implements the fetch address tags on tags completed. So you have to actually override some methods right there, which we're going to be looking at. In a Chiefy, you override the on tags completed in the method. Very important. Now let's get to look at the constants used. The request location permission, the pick place, the tracking location key to track the location, and the views from the layout, the button, the picker button, the text view, and the image view. The classes will be pointing at the tracking location, the fused location provider client, that's from the Google Android Google Places, the place detection client, and also the location callback. That's the result you get from the location returned. And the animation, which is actually going to be handled on the image view, called the animate to set. Those are the classes we call it right there from the app compact, and also implementing from the fetch address tags. Cool. In our own create view, we set up the layout, start the content to the layout activity main. You initialize the buttons and the view with the image view called its appropriate ID. You initialize the fused location client as well. You get the fused location provider client, and also you initialize the place detection client. Cool. Now let's set up the animation. You call the object, the rotator name, and you load the animator. You set the target to the image view. That's where you really need the animation to be targeted at. Now you restore the state if the activity is recreated. That's of state save instance. That's the essence of the tracking location key. Probably you rotate the device from portrait to landscape. It's actually going to keep on to the tracking location key. So you set the listener to the location button. Once the location button has been triggered, so what's going to happen if the M tracking location, if it's not, let's get to look at the value for the M tracking location. Okay, if you don't have that saved in an instance, it's actually going to start the tracking location, which is a fresh method. We'll get to look at this method, and F's is going to stop. So it's that you start the tracking location or you stop. So you click on it, start tracking. Another click on it stops tracking. Cool. And for the play speaker, you set an on-click listener to that as well. This calls the play speaker intent. Now you want to create that's the kind of let's say fragment out of the box from the Google Places, which is actually going to enable you to pick different places based on your device location, and you could actually select the nearest place. So you could actually get a callback from that too, if you want, if you desire. So you have to start an activity for a result, because you might expect a result on click of a particular location. That's the sense. So we'll be catching all these activity for results right there underneath. You initialize the location callbacks, and I told you earlier that you need a callback when you clicking on the location. So this is where you actually get the location results. Now you use an address to actually decode the callback. Once you pick a location, the address tags, which is a class, let's say a helper class, they're actually doing background to get coordinates to a real life address. So it's actually going to trigger this class. Can you see that? And you execute the get last location on that. We'll get to look at the class later on. So let's start the tracking the device. This you have to check for the permission and request them if they aren't present. If they are, you request periodic location updates and set a location text and start the animation. This way you start the tracking location. We'll pass this method right there when you actually trigger the location button. Can you see they are up there? Cool. So let's get to look at what this method is going to do. Firstly, you check the permission for access find location and permission to know if it's actually granted. And if it's granted, you move on. If it's not, it asks for the permission to be actually granted. Now, if it has been granted, you have to get the location request, call the callback as well, and set a loading text while you wait for the address to be returned. And that is actually going to set up to the text view you've had earlier on. And what's going to happen to the location button is actually going to change to stop tracking location. So once you trigger that again, it's going to stop tracking the location. That's just what I had. And the rotate animation startup at that point in time. So it's going to set the text view of the address. It's going to change the button to stop tracking location, and the rotation animation starts up once you trigger the method start tracking location. Let's set the stop tracking location. This stops tracking the device. It removes the location updates. It stops the animation, and it resets the UI. Let's say it's going to happen. You set the text start tracking location, and the button swivel back. Once you click on stop tracking, now the tracking location gets to a boolean of false, and the button swivel back to start tracking location, and the location text view is actually going to tell you to press the button to start tracking your location. Definitely no location tracked, and the animation ends up. So that's it. Now let's see the setup for the location request. This location request object containing the desired parameters. When you're getting the location request, you set the interval like 10,000 milliseconds, set the fastest interval 5,000, set the priority, which is high accuracy, and you turn the location request object. So that's for the location request. You set the last location on configuration change. So when you're trying to swivel, probably you want to change the state of the device. So that's the essence of the unsafe instance state. It's actually going to save the tracking key based on the value. There's a key value pairs. This is the key, and the value is going to be the tracking location. So once you're rotating, there's going to be a persistent flow of data. The callback that is invoked when the user responds to the permission dialog. We have a request permission, that's for defined location. The request code represented the permission request issued, an array that contains the permission they were requested, and an array for the results of the request for each permission requested. So those are the parameter, the request code, the permission, and the grant results. Now, if the request code is requesting location permission, if the permission is granted, you get the location. Otherwise, you show the toast. So if the grant results length is greater than 0 and the grant results array index is 0, so it's actually going to, you're testing it with the permission granted. If it is, it starts tracking the location, so it triggers the method once you've granted the permission. So that's just it. Else, location permission denied, please enable the permission. That's just going to be a toast that will be displayed. Now on task completed, you have to write this because you implemented the method on fetch address task on task completed. That's from the class. We'll get to look at what the fetch task is going to do, but now at the point in time you need to actually undo its override. That strokes, it throws an exception, the security exception. Now what is it actually going to test on? The tracking location, which is gotten from the places. That's a callback. Now you get the place name. Firstly, place that into the place likelihood buffer response. So it's actually going to be intelligent enough to actually predict the likelihood, the places that could actually match perfectly with the coordinates gotten. So that's just the idea. Now it gets the current place. It adds up the complete listener, which instantiates the incomplete listener, where you need to override a few methods, the incomplete, and where probably only that. You have to override that method, the incomplete, and if you get a result, you get the most likely places and they update the place name. So if the task is successful, the likely places and the task get the results. You have the maximum likelihood to start from 0, which is the float. Now the current place is going to be null, so you do a for loop through this, through the likelihood and the likely places that actually came out. So the nearest, I say the nearest one is the one that's going to be picked, which is the current place. You get the place likelihood place, and you get the place of that likelihood. So that's just how the logic flows. Now you update your UI with the value you get by setting the text to the location text. Cool. And you close the buffer and by releasing the likely places. So now you have the set Android type, which you actually pass into over here while you pass the current place. Now that is actually the Google Places, where you get your place. Now you need to set the type, what are the kind of places that it could actually come back. If it's a school, probably in the school, it's actually going to change the drawable for you. If you're in a gym, it's actually going to change that. If you're in a restaurant or in a library, so that's just it. Once the place is returned, is that just bespoke location that, wow, this is a general library that you are right in. It changes to a library or a different image. That's the animator image. That's it. Or if you're in a shopping mall, or that's just a restaurant or a very known location, it's actually going to change that. But if you're probably walking down the street, it's going to maintain the same image. But these are just 4 places likelihood that we actually use right there in the place type, just to tweak up the UI. If you're in the school, the gym, the restaurant, or the library. Cool. It's actually going to change the image view for that. On activity results for the play speaker, So you have to actually set the text to the location text as you've seen, and we have the on pause when probably the view is out of focus. The tracking location, you stop tracking at that point in time, so that the resources will be used by other applications, so you won't consume all resources since you are not on focus with the app. And on resume now, you could start tracking the application back, start tracking the location, and on resume of your application. Now a quick peep into the fetch address tags, which is actually going to be the background call. This extends the async tags. Now we have a constructor that takes the application context and the listener. This constructor is called from the main activity. You initialize this the context and the listener involved, the on tags completed. Cool. This is a tag for debug purpose. You need to override the doing background once you extend the syntax, and you also override on pre-execute, on post-execute, and method. You could also have the on pre-execute as well. We have the doing background. Now what's going to happen? You set up the geocoder. From the geocoder class, you have an object with a locale to get the default. You get the past location from params first index, and now you are adding that to the list array of the addresses out of the box. Now, so how are you going to do? So you get from the location the latitude and longitude, that's the coordinates, that's the what you need, and you pass that to the addresses, which is the list and array. So definitely you might be returning multiple coordinates. So that's just what that is. So actually going to be in a list. And for IO exception, discharge the network or other IO problems. So that's just what you could encounter. You could also encounter illegal argument exception, whereby you catch an invalid latitude or longitude values. So that is actually going to be handled gracefully as well. So if no address was found, you're going to print an error message. Address null, address size 0. So no address found at this point in time. Probably you are in a very, probably you are, I don't know where you may be, maybe the GPS is not even functioning at that point in time, or something has actually crashed out, and address is not, no location, no coordinates was gotten. So it's actually going to get the address found, no address found. Else, if there's no address, it's actually going to add that to an array list. So how are you going to add that to the array list? You created an array list of address parts. You have to fetch the address lines using the get address line method, and you join them and send them to the thread. So you use a for loop to start the counter from the 0 index, and you're actually going to get the counter should be less than or equals to the maximum address line index you have right there. At that point in time, you start adding each of these address to the address parts, which is an array list of string. You have that, get the address line based on its index, and the result message, you keep joining up to the address part, and you return the result message. So you could have an array list of address parts. Cool. And after that, you could call once the background thread is finished and updates the UI with the results you have. So the resulting reverse geocoded address or an error message if the tags failed. On post execute, you could do that where you actually call the listener on tags completed, which is the address. That's the address you need on tags completed. You have the on post execute address. On tags completed, that's the interface that you're actually going to use right there, the implement which you actually used to call some of the method right inside this class. So cool. This code actually you could learn more from this, and I will actually be stopping at this moment. After that, I'll do a peep in the manifest. In the manifest, you need to access two things: the find location, very important. That's the permission needed to actually get your location with the device you're holding, the GPS capability of the device. After that, you need the metadata, which is the API key, Google location, let's say the Google Play services or the Google Places. You're actually going to do that in the Google Developer Console. You register your application. You also need to get your debug SHA1 fingerprint or let's say a signed debug a key store. So it's either you use a key store which is going to sign your application, or use a debug for just for testing purpose. That can't roll to production. You all know that. So you need this SHA1 fingerprint. Once you have that, you copy that with the package name, and you have that registered in an Android project. So with that, you could enable your credential, where you enable the Places API. So that's cool. After 5 minutes, you have your API working, and you need that very important, your API key. So locking that into this manifest and set up your application. With this, you're good to go, and I will be showing you a demo whereby we're going to just look at how the application interacts, how it was able to get my location, and how it actually transformed that to a real life address, to the nearest address, if possible, your address. Cool. Thank you guys for hanging out with me throughout that video, and don't hesitate to leave a comment below if you find any issue whatsoever, burden, or in any aspect of Android development. And one more time, I'll say, please strike on the button, subscribe to my channel. Have a blessed time. Bye bye.